Some stories begin with a storm. This one began with a blizzard so fierce it seemed to erase the world, swallowing roads, homes, and hope beneath a blanket of white. But in the heart of that storm, a single act of courage would change lives both human and canine forever. It was the kind of night that made even the bravest souls think twice about venturing outside. The wind howled through the trees, rattling windows and piling snowdrifts against every door. In the darkness, headlights cut a lonely path down a deserted country road, the only sign of life for miles. Behind the wheel was Jake Turner, a Navy SEAL home on leave for the first time in years. He'd seen his share of danger deserts, jungles, and war zones, but nothing had prepared him for the bone-deep cold of a Midwest winter. He gripped the steering wheel, eyes narrowed against the swirling snow, his mind replaying memories of missions past and the promise he'd made to his late father. Take care of the old place. Don't let it fall apart. Jake was almost home when he saw a battered pickup truck half buried in a snowdrift, its hazard lights blinking weakly. He slowed, heart pounding. In a storm like this, a stranded vehicle could mean life or death. Pude ver, the wind rocking his SUV as he stepped out into the blizzard. The cold hit him like a slap, stealing his breath. He trudged through knee-deep snow, calling out, "Hello, anyone in there?" No answer, just the wind and the distant creak of ice-laden branches. Jake reached the truck, peering through the frosted window. At first, he saw nothing but darkness. Then, a faint movement, a flash of fur, a pair of white, terrified eyes. He yanked open the door, bracing for the worst. What he found made his heart stop. Huddled on the floor of the cab was a mother dog, her body curled protectively around a pile of shivering puppies. Their fur was matted with ice, their eyes dull with exhaustion and fear. The mother lifted her head, meeting Jake's gaze with a look that was equal parts hope and desperation. Jake's training kicked in. He knelt beside the dogs, speaking softly. "Hey girl, it's okay. I'm here to help." The mother whimpered, licking his hand. The puppies pressed closer, their tiny bodies trembling. Jake glanced around the cab, no sign of a human, just a tattered blanket and an empty coffee cup. He checked the back seat, the bed of the truck, but found nothing. Whoever had left these dogs here was long gone. The wind howled, shaking the truck. Jake knew they wouldn't survive much longer in this cold. He scooped up the puppies, tucking them inside his jacket, then lifted the mother into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her ribs sharp beneath her fur. As he carried them back to his SUV, Jake's mind raced. He'd faced gunfire, explosions, and the worst humanity had to offer, but nothing had ever felt as urgent or as important as saving this little family from the storm. He settled the dogs in the back seat, cranking the heat and wrapping them in every blanket he could find. The mother licked his hand again, her eyes shining with gratitude. Jake looked out at the blizzard, then back at the dogs. "Hang on, guys. You're safe now." But as he pulled back onto the road, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this rescue was just the beginning. The storm was far from over, and what happened next would test his courage, his heart, and his faith in second chances. Jake's hands trembled as he turned the heat up in his SUV, glancing in the rearview mirror at the shivering dog family. The mother dog, a golden retriever mix, with soulful brown eyes, curled protectively around her puppies, licking their tiny faces as if to reassure them. The puppies whimpered, their bodies pressed close, seeking warmth and comfort. Jake's mind raced as he navigated the treacherous road. The blizzard was getting worse, the wind howling so fiercely it rattled the windows. He could barely see the road ahead, but he knew every curve and dip by heart he'd grown up here. After all, still, the storm was relentless, and the drive felt endless. As he drove, memories flooded back of his own childhood dog, Max, who had been his best friend through every scraped knee and broken heart. He remembered the day Max had gone missing in a storm just like this, and how he'd searched for hours, refusing to give up. He'd found Max huddled under the porch, cold and scared, but alive. That was the day Jake had learned what it meant to fight for someone you loved. Now, as a Navy SEAL, Jake had faced dangers most people couldn't imagine. He'd rescued hostages, survived ambushes, and lost friends in the line of duty, but nothing had prepared him for the helplessness he felt now. Watching the mother dog shiver and the puppies whimper in the back seat, he glanced at the dashboard. His phone had no signal. and the radio was nothing but static. He was on his own. The blizzard intensified, snow piling up on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Jake's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He knew he had to get the dogs to safety, but his family's farmhouse was still miles away, and the roads were quickly becoming impassable. He thought about the person who had abandoned the dogs. What kind of desperation or cruelty could lead someone to leave a mother and her puppies in a freezing truck in the middle of a blizzard? Jake's anger simmered, but he pushed it aside. Right now, all that mattered was survival. In the back seat, the mother dog whimpered, her eyes meeting Jake's in the mirror. He spoke softly, trying to calm her. "It's okay, girl. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." The puppies huddled closer, their tiny bodies trembling. Jake reached back, stroking the mother's head. She licked his hand, her tail thumping weakly. As the miles crawled by, Jake's thoughts turned to his own struggles. He'd come home on leave to escape the memories of war, to find peace in the quiet of the countryside. But peace had been elusive. Nightmares haunted his sleep, and the weight of loss pressed on his heart. He'd hoped that coming home would help him heal. But now, in the heart of the storm, he realized that healing sometimes came in unexpected ways. The blizzard showed no signs of letting up. Jake's SUV skidded on a patch of ice, and he fought to keep control. The mother dog barked, sensing his fear. Jake took a deep breath, steadying himself. "We're almost there," he whispered, more to himself than to the dogs. Suddenly, the headlights caught something in the road, a fallen tree, half buried in snow, blocking the way. Jake slammed on the brakes, the SUV sliding to a stop just in time. He cursed under his breath, assessing the situation. There was no way around the tree, and turning back wasn't an option. The road behind was already covered in drifts. Jake looked at the dogs, then at the storm raging outside. He knew what he had to do. He grabbed his emergency kit from the trunk blankets, a flashlight, a first aid kit, and a flare gun. He wrapped the puppies in a blanket, tucking them inside his jacket, then lifted the mother dog into his arms. She was weak, but she licked his face, her eyes full of trust. Jake set out on foot, trudging through waist-deep snow, the wind biting at his face. Every step was a battle, but he pressed on, driven by the memory of Max, by the promise he'd made to his father, and by the desperate hope in the mother dog's eyes. As he struggled through the storm, Jake's mind flashed back to his SEAL training, endless days of running, climbing, and pushing past the limits of exhaustion. He remembered the words of his instructor. "You Dante quit when you're tired. You quit when you're done." He wasn't done. Not yet. The farmhouse was still a mile away, but Jake refused to give up. A percent on the dogs' lives and maybe his own hanging in the balance. And as the blizzard raged around them, Jake realized that sometimes the greatest battles weren't fought on distant battlefields, but in the quiet moments when you chose to save a life, no matter the cost. Jake's breath came in ragged bursts as he pushed through the blinding snow, the mother dog cradled in one arm. The blanket-trapped puppies pressed close to his chest. The wind howled, stinging his face and numbing his fingers, but he kept moving, one step at a time. Every few yards, he'd stop to check on the dogs, whispering words of encouragement. "You're doing great, Mama. Just a little farther. Hang on, babies," the mother dog whimpered, licking his cheek as if to say thank you. The puppies, barely old enough to open their eyes, huddled together for warmth, their tiny bodies trembling. Jake's mind raced with calculations: how much farther to the farmhouse, how long before the cold became too much, how to keep the dogs alive until they reached shelter. He remembered his SEAL training. Stay calm, assess, adapt. He'd survived worse than this, but never with so much at stake. Halfway to the house, Jake stumbled, his legs buckling under the weight of exhaustion and cold. He fell to his knees, shielding the dogs from the wind with his body. For a moment he considered turning back, but the thought vanished as quickly as it came. There was no going back, only forward. He forced himself to his feet, gritting his teeth against the pain. The mother dog licked his hand, her eyes full of trust. Jake drew strength from her faith in him, from the memory of Max, from the promise he'd made to his father. As he trudged on, the snow seemed to ease, the wind dying down just enough for him to see the faint outline of the farmhouse in the distance. Relief flooded him, giving him the strength to push through the final stretch. When he finally reached the porch, Jake collapsed against the door, gasping for breath. He fumbled with his keys, finally managing to unlock the door and stagger inside. The warmth of the house hit him like a wave. He set the dogs down gently on a pile of blankets near the fireplace, then rushed to build a fire, his hands shaking. As the flames roared to life, he wrapped the mother dog and her puppies in every blanket he could find, rubbing their fur to restore circulation. The mother dog whimpered, her eyes fluttering closed. Jake checked her pulse weak, but steady. The puppies mewled, their cries growing stronger as they warmed. Jake's relief was overwhelming. He'd made it. They'd made it. He grabbed his phone, hoping for a signal. Nothing. The storm had knocked out the power lines, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. He was on his own. Jake switched into survival mode. He boiled water on the wood stove, mixing it with powdered milk to feed the puppies. He checked the mother dog for injuries, cleaning her wounds with antiseptic from his first aid kit. He massaged her legs, whispering words of comfort. As the hours passed, the dogs began to recover. The mother dog lifted her head, licking Jake's hand. The puppies nursed, their cries fading to contented sighs. Jake sat back, exhaustion washing over him. He watched the dogs, his heart full. He'd saved him. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. But as he drifted off to sleep, curled up on the floor beside the dogs, a nagging worry crept in. The mother dog was still weak, her breathing shallow. The puppies were fragile, their survival far from certain. Jake knew the battle wasn't over. The storm still raged outside, and the nearest vet was hours away. He'd have to rely on his training, his instincts, and the bond he'd formed with the dogs. As he closed his eyes, Jake made a silent promise. I won't let you down. Not now. Not ever. And as the fire crackled and the blizzard howled, a new family was born, one forged in the heart of a storm, bound by courage, hope, and the unbreakable will to survive. The storm raged on through the night, battering the farmhouse with wind and snow. Jake barely slept, waking every hour to check on the dog family. The mother dog's breathing was shallow, her body still trembling despite the warmth of the fire. The puppies, though stronger, whimpered in their sleep, their tiny bodies curled against her for comfort. As dawn broke, a pale gray light filtered through the frosted windows. Jake brewed a pot of strong coffee, his mind heavy with worry. He knew the dogs needed a vet, but the roads were still impassable, and his phone showed no bars. He was truly cut off. He knelt beside the mother dog, stroking her head. Hang in there, girl. Help is coming. Promise. As he checked her for injuries again, his hand brushed against something hard beneath her fur collar, half hidden by matted hair and ice. Jake gently untangled it, revealing a faded tag. He squinted at the inscription, barely legible. Daisy. If found, please call. The number was scratched out, but a name remained. Jake's mind raced. The Millers were a family who lived on the far side of the county, known for their love of animals. He remembered hearing rumors that they'd fallen on hard times, that their farm had been foreclosed just before the winter set in. Had Daisy and her puppies been abandoned when the family left, or had someone else left them in the truck, hoping they'd be found? Jake's heart ached for Daisy and her lost family. He wondered if the Millers even knew what had happened to their dog. He made a mental note to try the local animal shelter and sheriff's office as soon as the storm let up. As he pondered the mystery, Daisy whimpered, her eyes pleading. Jake checked her paws and belly, finding a deep cut on her hind leg likely from scrambling over ice or broken glass. He cleaned the wound as best he could, wrapping it with gauze from his first aid kit. The puppies stirred, their cries growing louder. Jake mixed more powdered milk, feeding them with a syringe. Daisy watched, her eyes full of gratitude and worry. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed outside, the sound of a tree limb snapping under the weight of snow. Jake jumped to his feet, heart pounding. He peered out the window, scanning the yard. The storm had knocked down a massive branch, blocking the driveway completely. Jake's sense of isolation deepened. He was trapped, with no way to call for help, and no way to get Daisy and her puppies to a vet. He felt the old familiar surge of adrenaline, the same feeling he'd had on missions when everything went wrong and the only way out was through. He checked his supplies and of food and water for a few days, but not much more. He rationed the firewood, knowing he'd have to keep the house warm for the dog's sake. As the day wore on, Daisy's condition worsened. She developed a fever, her breathing growing more labored. Jake did everything he could. Cool compresses, gentle words, and constant care, but he knew she needed antibiotics. And soon, desperate, Jake searched the farmhouse for anything that might help. In an old medicine cabinet, he found a bottle of expired antibiotics left over from his father's last illness. Hesitated, knowing the risks, but decided it was better than nothing. He crushed a small dose into water and coaxed Daisy to drink. As night fell, Jake sat by the fire, Daisy's head in his lap. The puppies nestled close. He whispered stories of hope and survival, willing her to hold on. But as the wind howled and the snow piled higher, Jake knew the odds were against them. He was running out of time, and the mystery of Daisy's past and her family's fate haunted his thoughts. He stared into the flames, searching for answers, for hope, for a way out of the storm. And as Daisy drifted into a restless sleep, Jake made another silent promise. "I'll find your family. I'll get you through this. No one gets left behind." But as the blizzard raged on, Jake realized that saving Daisy and her puppies would take everything he had and more. The second night in the farmhouse was even colder than the first. The wind rattled the windows, and the fire in the hearth seemed to shrink with every hour. Jake barely slept, his mind racing with worry for Daisy and her puppies. He checked her wound again, still oozing, her fever rising. The puppies whimpered, hungry and restless, but Daisy was too weak to nurse them. Jake's training told him what he needed to do: get help, and fast. But the storm outside was relentless, and the fallen tree still blocked the driveway. He tried the radio in his truck, but the battery was dead. His phone was still useless, the signal lost to the blizzard. He paced the kitchen, weighing his options. He could wait and hope the storm broke, but Daisy might not last another day. Or he could try to make it to the nearest neighbor a mile away through waist-deep snow, carrying a wounded dog and 4 tiny puppies. Jake looked at Daisy, her eyes pleading, and made his decision. He packed a backpack with supplies: water, food, a flashlight, the first aid kit, and the bottle of antibiotics. He wrapped the puppies in a thick blanket, tucking them inside his jacket, and gently lifted Daisy into his arms. The wind nearly knocked him over as he stepped outside. The snow was deeper than before, the cold biting through his clothes. But Jake pressed on, every step a battle against exhaustion and fear. He moved slowly, careful not to jostle Daisy or the puppies. The world shrank to the sound of his own breathing, the crunch of snow under his boots, and the distant howl of the wind. He thought of his SEAL training, how they'd been taught to keep moving, no matter how tired or scared they were. He remembered the words of his old instructor: "You don't quit when you're retired. You quit when you're done." Halfway to the neighbor's house, Jake stumbled his legs, shaking with fatigue. He fell to his knees, shielding the dogs from the wind with his body. For a moment, he considered turning back, but Daisy whimpered, licking his hand. The puppies squirmed, their tiny bodies pressed close for warmth. Jake forced himself to his feet, gritting his teeth against the pain. He proceeded, undriven by the memory of Max, by the promise he'd made to his father, and by the desperate hope in Daisy's eyes. The neighbor's house finally came into view, a faint glow in the darkness, a beacon of hope. Jake staggered to the door, pounding with his fist. The door opened, and a woman gasped in shock. "Jake! What on earth?" He collapsed into the entryway, Daisy and the puppies still clutched in his arms. "Please," he gasped, "they need help." The woman, Mrs. Harper, a retired nurse, sprang into action. She took Daisy and the puppies, wrapping them in warm towels and checking their vitals. She called the local vet, who promised to come as soon as the roads were clear. Jake slumped against the wall, exhaustion washing over him. He'd made Italiano. They'd made it. Mrs. Harper brewed a pot of tea, pressing a mug into Jake's hands. "You did good, son. You saved their lives." Jake nodded, too tired to speak. He watched as Mrs. Harper tended to Daisy, cleaning her wound and giving her a fresh dose of antibiotics. The puppies nursed, their cries fading to contented sighs. As the storm raged outside, Jake drifted into a fitful sleep, haunted by dreams of war and loss. But when he woke, the first rays of sunlight were streaming through the window, and the blizzard had finally passed. The vet arrived, checking Daisy and the puppies. "You got them here just in time," he said, his voice full of admiration. "Another few hours, and they might not have made it." Jake felt a wave of relief, gratitude, and pride. He'd faced worse than this, but nothing had ever mattered more. As the sun rose over the snow-covered fields, Jake knew the hardest part was over. But the journey was far from finished. He still had to find Daisy's family, to make sure she and her puppies had a future. And as he looked at the little dog family, curled up by the fire, he made a silent promise. "I'll see this through. No one gets left behind." But as he sipped his tea and watched the snow melt from the windows, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the story was only just beginning. The relief of rescue was quickly replaced by a new kind of anxiety. As the sun rose higher, the reality of Daisy's condition set in. The vet, Dr. Collins, worked quickly, administering fluids and stronger antibiotics. But Daisy's fever was stubborn. The puppies, though safe and warm, were still weak, their tiny bodies fighting to recover from the ordeal. Jake watched helplessly as Dr. Collins and Mrs. Harper did everything they could. He felt the old, familiar ache of helplessness. Same feeling he'd had on missions when a teammate was wounded and all he could do was wait and hope. He paced the small living room, his mind racing with what-ifs and regrets. Mrs. Harper tried to reassure him. "You did everything right, Jake. If you hadn't brought them here, they wouldn't have had a chance." But Jake couldn't shake the guilt. He replayed every decision. Should he have tried to break through the storm sooner? Should he have risked the drive to the next town? He sat by Daisy's side, stroking her head, whispering words of encouragement. The puppies whimpered, their cries softer now. But Jake could see the toll the blizzard had taken. He remembered the faces of the Millers, the family who had once loved Daisy, and wondered if they even knew what had happened to her. As the day wore on, neighbors began to arrive, drawn by the story of the Navy SEAL who had braved the storm to save a family of dogs. They brought food, blankets, and offers of help. Some stayed to sit with Daisy. Others played with the puppies, their laughter filling the house with hope. The local news caught wind of the story, and soon a reporter arrived. Camera in hand. Jake was reluctant to talk, but Mrs. Harper insisted. "People need to know what you did. Maybe someone will recognize Daisy and help us find her family." Jake agreed, telling the story as simply as he could. He spoke of the blizzard, the abandoned truck, the desperate fight to save Daisy and her puppies. He spoke of the promise he'd made to his father, and the lessons he'd learned as a SEAL. Never hide up. Never leave anyone behind. The story aired that night, and the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from across the county, offers to adopt the puppies, donations for Daisy's care, and, most importantly, a call from a woman who recognized Daisy's photo. "My name is Linda Miller," the voice on the phone said, trembling with emotion. "That's our dog. We lost her when we had to leave the farm. We've been searching for her ever since." Jake's heart leaped. He arranged for Linda and her children to visit the next day, hoping that seeing her family would give Daisy the strength to pull through. But as night fell, Daisy's condition worsened. Her breathing grew shallow, airways dull. Dr. Collins did everything he could, but the infection was strong, and Daisy was so very tired. Jake sat by her side, holding her paw, tears streaming down his face. He whispered stories of hope and survival, willing her to hold on just a little longer. The puppies huddled close, their tiny bodies pressed against their mother. Jake stroked their fur, promising them that they would never be alone again. As the hours passed, the house grew quiet. The neighbors went home, the news crews packed up, and only Jake, Mrs. Harper, and Dr. Collins remained. Jake prayed for a miracle, for the strength to keep going, for Daisy to find her way back. And as the first light of dawn crept through the window, Daisy lifted her head, her eyes meeting Jake's. She licked his hand, her tail thumping weakly. Jake smiled through his tears. "You're a fighter, girl, just a little longer. Your family's coming." But even as hope flickered, Jake knew the battle wasn't over. The hardest part was still ahead. The morning sun brought a fragile hope to the farmhouse. Jake barely slept, dozing in a chair beside Daisy and her puppies, waking at every whimper or shift. Mrs. Harper brewed coffee and made breakfast for everyone, her gentle presence a comfort in the tense quiet. By mid-morning, a car pulled up the snowy drive. Jake stepped outside, heart pounding, as Linda Miller and her 2 children climbed out, bundled in coats and scarves. Linda's eyes were red from crying, but she managed a grateful smile. "Thank you for calling," she said, her voice trembling. "We never stopped looking for Daisy. We thought she was gone." Jake led them inside, where Daisy lay on a bed of blankets, her puppies nestled close. At the sound of Linda's voice, Daisy's ears perked up. She lifted her head, her eyes brightening with recognition. "Daisy!" Linda cried, dropping to her knees. The children rushed to their mother's side, tears streaming down their faces as they hugged their long-lost dog. Daisy licked their hands, her tail wagging weakly. The puppies squirmed, sensing the joy in the room. Jake watched, his heart swelling with relief and pride. He'd seen reunions like this before, soldiers coming home, families finding each other after disaster, but this one felt different. It was a reminder that even in the darkest storms, love could find its way home. Dr. Collins checked Daisy, smiling as he saw her energy return. "She's still weak, but seeing her family is the best medicine. With a little more care, she'll make a full recovery." Linda hugged Jake, her gratitude overflowing. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved her. You saved all of them." Jake shook his head, humbled. "I just did what anyone would do." But Mrs. Harper smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Not everyone would have braved a blizzard for a family of dogs. You're a hero, Jake." Word of the reunion spread quickly. Neighbors stopped by to offer congratulations, bringing treats and toys for the puppies. The local news returned, capturing the moment Daisy was reunited with her family. The story went viral, inspiring people across the country. Jake found himself at the center of a whirlwind of attention interviews, thank you letters, even offers to adopt the puppies from families as far away as California. But through it all, he stayed focused on Daisy and her recovery. He visited the Millers' new home every day, helping Linda care for Daisy and the puppies. He taught the children how to feed and bathe the dogs, sharing stories of his own childhood and the lessons he'd learned as a SEAL. As the days passed, Daisy grew stronger. Her wound healed, her fur regained its shine, and her eyes sparkled with happiness. The puppies thrived, growing into playful, curious bundles of energy. Jake felt a sense of healing, too. The nightmares that had haunted him since leaving the service began to fade, replaced by the joy of helping others, of making a difference. One afternoon, as he played with the puppies in the yard, Linda approached, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You gave us our family back," she said softly. "If you ever need anything, we're here for you." Jake smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years. "Thank you, Linda. That means more than you know." But even as life returned to normal, a new challenge loomed. The Millers' landlord had given them notice they had to move again, and finding a place that allowed dogs, especially with a litter of puppies, was nearly impossible. Jake promised to help, rallying the community to find a solution. He called in favors, posted on social media, and reached out to local shelters and rescue groups. The response was overwhelming. Offers poured in: temporary foster homes, donations for food and vet bills, even a job offer for Linda at a nearby animal clinic. Jake realized that the storm had brought more than just hardship. It had brought people together, forging bonds that would last a lifetime. As the sun set over the snowy fields, Jake sat on the porch with Daisy at his feet, the puppies tumbling in the yard. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that he'd kept his promise not just to his father, but to himself. But the journey wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, still lives to change, still hope to share. And as Jake watched the stars appear in the winter sky, he knew that sometimes the greatest battles were fought not with weapons, but with love, courage, and the unbreakable will to never give up. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change and hope. With Jake's help, the Millers found a new home, a small farmhouse on the edge of town, with plenty of space for Daisy and her puppies to run and play. The community pitched in, helping them move, painting walls, and building a sturdy fence for the dogs. The puppies, now healthy and strong, became the darlings of the neighborhood, each one finding a loving family nearby. Jake was there for every step. He helped Linda with the paperwork, fixed leaky pipes, and taught the children how to train the puppies. He even organized a puppy adoption day at the local park, where families gathered to meet the little ones and hear the story of their rescue. The event was a huge success. with every puppy finding a home and the Millers receiving enough donations to cover Daisy's medical bills and a year's worth of food. But the biggest change was in Jake himself. The nightmares that had haunted him for years faded, replaced by dreams of laughter, wagging tails, and the warmth of a family that had welcomed him as one of their own. He found himself smiling more, sleeping better, and feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't known since his days as a SEAL. One crisp Saturday morning, the town held a special ceremony in the park to honor Jake, Daisy, and the Millers. The mayor gave a heartfelt speech, praising Jake, his courage and compassion. In the darkest storm, you brought light and hope, not just to a family of dogs, but to all of us. You reminded us what it means to be a community. Linda and her children presented Jake with a handmade plaque. To our hero, Jake Turner, thank you for saving our family and showing us the power of never giving up. Jake accepted the plaque, his eyes shining with emotion. He looked out at the crowd, neighbors, friends, and strangers who had become family, and felt a deep sense of belonging. But the day held one more surprise. As the ceremony ended, a woman approached Jake, her eyes brimming with tears. You don't remember me, do you? She asked softly. Jake studied her face, then gasped in recognition. Sarah, Sada nodded, smiling through her tears. You saved my brother in Afghanistan. He always said you were the bravest man he'd ever met. Jake hugged her, overwhelmed by the connection. He saved me, too. Sarah knelt to pet Daisy, her voice trembling. You never stopped saving people, did you? Jake shook his head, humbled. I just do what I can. The story of Jake and Daisy spread far beyond the town. News outlets picked it up, and soon, letters and emails poured in from across the country. Veterans, animal lovers, and people who had faced their own storms, all inspired by the tale of a Navy SEAL and a family of dogs who refused to give up. Jake was invited to speak at schools, animal shelters, and veterans groups. He shared his story, not as a hero, but as a reminder that anyone could make a difference. You don't have to be a SEAL to save a life, he told the crowd. You just have to care enough to try. The Millers thrived in their new home. Linda started working at the animal clinic. Her children excelled in school, and Daisy became a local celebrity, visiting classrooms and nursing homes as a therapy dog. The puppies, now grown, often returned for playdates, filling the yard with joyful chaos. Jake found peace in the simple things: morning walks with Daisy, Sunday dinners with the Millers, and quiet evenings on the porch, watching the stars. He knew he'd never forget the blizzard, the fear, or the fight to save Daisy and her puppies. But he also knew that the storm had given him a gift, a second chance at life, love, and belonging. And as he watched Daisy chase her puppies across the yard, Jake realized that sometimes the greatest rescues were the ones that saved us, too. But even as the town celebrated, Jake felt a new challenge stirring in his heart. He wanted to do more to help other animals, other families, other veterans struggling to find their way home. He began to dream of starting a rescue organization, one that would bring together people and animals in need, offering hope, healing, and a place to belong. And as the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in gold and pink, Jake knew that the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The seasons changed, and with them so did the lives of everyone touched by the blizzard rescue. Jake's idea for a rescue organization took root, fueled by the outpouring of support from the community and beyond. With Linda's help, he founded Second Chance Paws, a nonprofit dedicated to saving animals in crisis and pairing them with veterans and families in need of healing. The farmhouse that had once been a place of solitude became a hub of hope. Volunteers arrived every weekend to help build kennels, clear trails, and set up a training center. Local businesses donated supplies, and the town council granted land for a new animal shelter. The Millers, now thriving, became the heart of the organization, Linda as the director, her children as junior volunteers, and Daisy as the official ambassador. Daisy's story inspired countless others. Families who had lost pets found comfort in her gentle presence. Veterans struggling with PTSD found purpose in training and caring for rescue dogs. Children who had been afraid of storms learned to face their fears, knowing that even in the darkest night, there was always hope. Jake found himself busier than ever, but happier, too. He led training sessions, organized adoption events, and spoke at schools about courage, compassion, and the power of never giving up. He watched as dogs and people alike found new homes, new friends, and new reasons to believe in second chances. The puppies, now grown, became therapy dogs, search and rescue partners, and beloved family pets. They returned often to the farmhouse, filling the yard with laughter and joy. Daisy, now fully recovered, spent her days visiting hospitals and nursing homes, her gentle spirit bringing comfort wherever she went. Jake's own healing was slow but steady. The nightmares faded, replaced by dreams of hope and belonging. He found Lotua, fellow volunteer named Rachel, whose kindness and strength matched his own. Together, they built a life filled with purpose, laughter, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The story of the Blizzard rescue became a legend in the town, told and retold at every gathering. The mayor declared an annual Second Chance Day, celebrating the power of community and the courage of those who refused to give up. On the first anniversary of the rescue, the town gathered at the park for a celebration. Jake stood on stage, Daisy at his side, the Millers and their children in the front row. He looked out at the crowd, neighbors, friends, strangers who had become family, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He spoke from the heart, his voice steady and strong. A year ago, I opened a truck door in a blizzard and found a family of dogs fighting for their lives. I thought I was saving them, but the truth is, Tay, Sabedme. They reminded me that no matter how lost we feel, no matter how dark the storm, there is always hope. There is always a second chance. The crowd erupted in applause, some wiping away tears. Jake smiled, hugging Daisy close. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Jake walked through the park, greeting old friends and new faces. He watched as children played with the puppies, as veterans shared stories around the fire, as families laughed and celebrated the gift of second chances. He knew that the journey wasn't over. There would be more storms, more battles to fight, more lives to save. But he also knew that he would never face them alone. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a door opened in a storm, a hand extended in hope, can change the world. Because in the end, it's not the battles we fight or the medals we earn that define us. It's the love we give, the lives we touch, and the courage to believe in second chances. And sometimes, the family you save is the one that saves you right back.